Welcome back to my channel. Thank you for your support. I hope that this video here is going to help you guys. If you've never been arrested, never been in trouble, it's still very valuable. Or if you have been arrested, right, and you've gotten in trouble before, this is a great video so that you don't end up getting wrongfully convicted the way I was. I learned some great lessons from that experience. Expensive lessons, right? You don't want to have to go through that. If I can help at least one of you guys or gals avoid spending time in jail or prison, right, wrongfully, all this effort is well worth it, right? This is why I create this content. It was a terrible experience, but it was a great experience because I learned a lot, and I think I can help bring about some positive changes, right? Just before we even get started though, one thing I always want to point out, this is not legal advice. I'm not an attorney. Consult with your attorney for all this stuff, right, that we're going to talk about right here. I'll be discussing 7 different points and several sub-points. And you want to stick around to the end because right at the end I discussed probably the most important one out of the 7 because that's the one that helped me get my conviction overturned, right, my wrongful conviction. So it's important. All 7 of them are important. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's jump into it. So the number one thing, right, is keep this in mind. A lot of people mess up. Like, you understand the context of what we're discussing here today is you've been arrested, right? Or you're right on the verge of being arrested, right? Right in that area there, right? Whether it's right before or right after you've been arrested, meaning handcuffs have been put on you. Understand that when they read your Miranda rights, right, and they tell you that anything you say can and will be used against you, it's not a joke, it's real. Officers have body cams. Officers can testify, even if there is no recording, they can testify to what you told them, right, or allegedly told them. And this includes everybody, not just the arresting officer. It could be the transporting officer. It could be the officer that books you into jail. The officer that does your strip search, right? So be careful what you say. Do not talk to any of the officers about your case. And this is, once again, something you want to talk with your attorney about, but here's my opinion, right, is if they've already arrested you, right, then at this point they've already determined that there's enough evidence to arrest you. So at this point they're not trying to second guess themselves, right? Should we not, at this point they've made the decision, you're being arrested, and anything that they can use that, absolutely they will use against you. At this point they're saying, hey, we got our man, we got our gal, we know that they're guilty, they committed the crime that we're after. Let's try to make this case stick, right? Try to make it as strong as possible. So it's nothing against the officers per se, right? At this point, whoever it is that made the decision, right or wrong, right, that you should be arrested, these other people that are involved, right, the booking officers, transport officers, at this point, they're just assuming, right, that the right decision was made to charge you, to arrest you. It's nothing against them, right, necessarily, but they're just doing their job. So you have to be careful what you say to these officers. In fact, you should only be talking about just logistics, property issues, stuff that has nothing to do with the actual details of your case. Because, and maybe, right, I'm just throwing this out there, you're 100% innocent, and then you say something to an officer about you being innocent, but if he misinterprets, right, what you say, right, or he misunderstands what you say, right, then why not have, why would the prosecutor not have him come up 6 months later at your trial or a year later, come to your trial and testify to his misunderstanding or, the way that he misconstrued what you said, right? And all this is just to say, invoke your Fifth Amendment rights. Do not talk to anybody, any of the officers about this, right? Pretty important. So that's number one. Number two is, so once you actually do get to the jail, right? And by the way, this is for another video, but it's a miserable experience, right? The entire thing. And I think that at some point I'll be creating a video about the mindset to help you if you've never been incarcerated, never been arrested. I think it's important to understand that mindset, and we'll go into that some other time. But for now, what's important is this in connection with this point that we're discussing, right? Do not talk to your cellmate, do not talk to other inmates about why you've been arrested. If you can make something up about why you've been arrested, that's probably better. And when I say make something up, something that's completely unrelated, right? You do not want to talk to anybody there at the jail. it's very common, right, for prosecutors to use jailhouse rats to put their case together, especially if their case is weak, right? If they have a case that's kind of speculative, but they had no one else, and it's duck, duck, goose, and you're it, and they've decided to arrest you, and it's not always that arbitrary, right? But sometimes it is, unfortunately. So if they've done that, they're going to try to, they're grabbing for straws, right? Whatever they can to try to make that conviction stick, right? When it goes to trial. So it's very common for them. Listen to this. This is important. It's very common, and we're assuming you're innocent, for them to get an inmate who they've developed this kind of relationship with, right? Prosecutor to jailhouse snitch, right? Jailhouse rat. Because this is common. This becomes a thing for jailhouse rats, right? They work regularly and closely with prosecutors and police officers, and it would be very normal for them to select somebody like that, right? That they already have within the system, or to go ahead and just somehow find a way to, I don't want to go into all the speculative stuff, but to put somebody like that with you in your jail cell, right? In your little cell, and to gain your trust and start talking to you about your case. And once again, we're assuming you're innocent, and you're sitting there talking to this person about your situation. What's to stop that person from, and it happens, right? I've seen it personally, where this person will take what you said, they will put their own spin on it, right? Because the incentives are so high for these jailhouse rats and snitches that they have no issue, no qualms with making stuff up. And then at this point, you're like, well, this jailhouse snitch can't prove that I said X, Y, and Z. Right. But now you're going to trial, and it's your word against the prosecutor, the scant evidence, right? Assuming there isn't a lot of evidence. But then you also have this other person, and if they come across as more articulate or more believable, even if they're lying, and there's a lot of those people, right? We know them out in society, right? They're just masters at lying. Well, now you just got, it's you against 1, 2, 3, you know what I mean? And I'm counting evidence of people that are going to be testifying against you, including all the officers, including any alleged witnesses. So it muddies up the waters further. It increases the probabilities that you'll be wrongfully convicted, right? Because now you have somebody else that lived with you for, a week or a few days or whatever, and you allegedly told them, right, divulged the secret. It's insane, but it happens all the time, and it's crazy. But it's a tactic that's used very commonly by prosecutors, just to avoid all this mess by simply not talking to any of the inmates there, right, that you're going to be around there at the jail. Avoid talking to any of them about your case. Just avoid it altogether. It's just not worth the risk, right? They're not going to be able to help you. Leave it at that. So that's number 2. So the number 3 thing I would start doing if I was you, right? If you've been wrongfully arrested and now you're sitting there at the jail, instead of stressing or reading some of this garbage fiction, right? That's all around you. Books, right, that are fiction, and if you're free, right, and you're out and you're wealthy and you're successful, go ahead and read all the fiction you want, right? But if you've been wrongfully arrested, that's garbage. While you're in prison, that's garbage. You got to be focusing on trying to get all the evidence, all the witnesses. Start making a checklist. That's number 3. Start making a checklist of all the evidence and witnesses and everything you can, right, that you're going to eventually share with your attorney, because initially you're not talking to your attorney, right? So you want to start putting that together, put that in a safe place, obviously. And ideally, you want to set it up so that it's more like a letter, right, to your attorney, because then there's some confidentiality, right, that attaches. So if an officer comes in and searches your cell, well, that was a letter to your attorney, right? He should not be able to use it. So I wouldn't be surprised if in some states they've completely obliterated, that privilege, right? Because I'm gonna get to here in a moment. Here in Utah, it's pretty crazy, some of the stuff that they get away with, right? Just violating people's fundamental rights, right? Innocent or guilty, just fundamental rights when it comes to this type of stuff. And I'll get to that here in a moment. So anyway, start making a checklist of all the stuff, all the evidence, all the witnesses that should be reached out to by your attorney or by a private investigator, whatever. Use your time constructively, right? Instead of stressing, watching TV or reading, like I said, fiction books, start putting a checklist together and get that ready, right? Be ready to share that with your attorney. So anyways, number 3. So number 4 is you want to, once you actually meet with your attorney, you want to go ahead and ask them to hire a private investigator as quickly as possible. Hire a private investigator and have that private investigator come talk to you, because in the beginning, your attorney's not going to know all the facts the way you do, right? You're going to know the facts significantly better than your attorney. So it's important for you to be able to communicate directly with the private investigator, to be able to explain to them, right, the nuances of why this piece of evidence is important, why this potential witness is important, why this needs to be done immediately. Another point, right, sub point within that is that people forget, as far as what they saw or what you told them, what somebody else told them. Evidence disappears, right? It gets lost, destroyed, whatever. You want to make sure that you talk to your attorney, like that very first time you talk to him, ask him to send over a private investigator as soon as possible. And then you're going to have your checklist, right, that you're going to give to your attorney. You're going to keep copies of that. So you're going to give a copy of that also to the private investigator, keep a copy for yourself, and keep adding to that list, right? Or you might have to, end up creating a new list, right, to try to stay organized, maybe put dates on them, and I'll cover that here in a moment, why that's so important, right, to have dates on stuff. That was number 4. So number 5 is, and this is real important, and it's very easy to forget about this, right, is to get your finances in order. So if you have a business or you have multiple businesses, make sure that, you got to keep them going. Because if you don't keep those businesses going, or if you don't have your finances in order, it's going to have a ripple effect. And eventually, you may end up, right, if that isn't the case from the beginning, you may end up with a public defender. Now, there are some good public defenders, but generally speaking, that's not the case. At least that's not been my experience, and that's not been the experience of people that I've talked to. So if you do have a private attorney, right, that you're paying with, revenue or profits from your businesses, you want to make sure those businesses are solid. And it's real easy to get caught up in your own emotions, or get caught up in all the other stuff, right? The evidence and the potential witnesses and all that other stuff, and completely neglect your businesses. And you can't do that. You got to make sure those keep going, right? You got to make sure that your home, right? If you don't lose your home, right? That you don't lose like your car and all this other stuff, right? And maybe there is no way around it, right? There is that possibility that there's no way around it. You're going to lose everything anyways until you make bail. But if at all possible, pay attention to your finances, keep your businesses going, put somebody who's competent in charge of them, right? So that they don't collapse. I made that mistake personally, right? I put somebody in charge that I trusted, but was not very competent. And one by one, all my businesses collapsed. Inevitably, I had to go and I had to accept the appointment of a public defender. And then after that, it just pretty much all went downhill after that, right? So that's important. Keep that in mind. Get your finances in order while you're going through all the chaos, right? If at all possible. That's number 5. Number 6, be careful what you say when you talk to on the phone. It doesn't matter who you talk to on the phone, even if it's your own attorney. What's crazy here in Utah, it's one of the points that I mentioned earlier, is here in Utah, like there's the main jail there at the Salt Lake City, county jail. Even your calls to your attorney are recorded. So potentially the prosecutor has access to those, right? I mean, if it's recorded. Now that's not the case in every jail here in Utah, but that's insane. Like, I mean, those conversations are confidential. But at this jail, allegedly, right, this gets shared. These recorded conversations get shared with the prosecutor, and I know for sure that they're recorded. You don't have a privileged line, right? It's not like the way it should be, right? Because if you're talking to your attorney, that's protected, right, under the 6th Amendment, but not here. So not in some of these jails. They can record them, and then, who knows who actually has access to those, right? You'd like to believe that the prosecutor doesn't have access, but so you have to be careful, because I've seen people, right, that were innocent. They were arrested, they were, put in jail, they couldn't make bail, or were not given bail, and then they talk to their, loved ones about, things that they can do to help with the case. But what happens is, if they have you recorded, and I'm just going to use this as an example because I actually saw this one where this guy there's some charges in connection with some domestic violence, right? And he says there was none, right? There was no domestic violence. This was just a dispute, right? Just arguing, and the wife decided to make up some charges against him. And this happens, obviously, if you understand the criminal justice system, if you watch enough of my content, you know that it's very easy for that to happen. So in this case, this is his version of the story, right? He says nothing actually happened, no violence, it was just an argument. But she decided to make some stuff up. So he thought he would ask his family members to reach out to her to say, hey, I'm sorry, please don't do this, don't make up these charges, this is serious stuff, right? You don't understand what you're doing, like, just, you could be upset and make stuff up, but not this, because if you make this up and I'm convicted of this, I could end up spending a long time in prison. Anyways, he asked his family to reach out to his wife, and that automatically, right, is recorded. So that's evidence. Now all of a sudden, that's considered obstruction of justice or tampering with a witness, right? Both of them are very serious charges. Both of them are felonies. And so he ended up with some additional felonies, right? And you can't beat those because they got you recorded. You can't do that. Or another guy also, right, allegedly innocent, and totally different charges. In his situation, once again, he called his family, decided to speak in a different language. It was Tongan, and he thought that, that they wouldn't be able to figure it out or something. I don't know what he was thinking. But he said some things that implied that he might be guilty. Implied, right? I mean, it's not that he admitted, hey, I'm guilty, he just made some statements. And because of the statements that he made, right, it was very easy to get for the prosecution to get somebody to translate that. It's not like they can do that pretty much with almost any language, right? I mean, there might be some exceptions, but yeah, good luck, right? Now they had that's evidence. Now they're going to use that at trial to imply that he's guilty, right? I mean, it was just an insinuation because, like I said, he was alleging that he was innocent, and it's crazy, right? Anyways, there's a bunch of examples that come to mind, right? Different types of cases. The point here is those conversations are recorded, and they do have translators that can translate that stuff. And even if you make a statement where you're not really admitting guilt, even if you just it sounds like, or it could be, like the prosecution can twist that statement or comment to make it seem like you're guilty, that could get you in trouble. So you have to be careful what you say on the phones. Most people don't take that serious. They think, there's thousands of inmates or hundreds of inmates here that are talking on the phone. What are the chances that they're gonna listen to mine and record mine and translate mine or use mine to try to twist my words or whatever, right? No. You're wrong. Like I've seen it over and over, and it's crazy how people do this, and I don't understand it. But yeah, that's number 6. So number 7, and like I said, probably the most important one is this, and that's what got my wrongful conviction overturned, is that luckily I implemented this one. Not in the ideal and perfect way, but what I'm referring to is this. With your attorney, right? With whoever attorney, whether it's a public defender or private attorney, try to keep conversations on the phone to a minimum. Try to write letters. You write letters, try to make them as professional as possible, right? Because this might be evidence in the future, and that's happened in my case. And put dates on them. And that's where I messed up. I didn't always have dates on my stuff. Have dates on them, have your name on the top so that if anybody looks at these letters in the future, whether it's 5 years or 10 years down the line, they know who it's from, who it's to, the date, and then make the content as clear as possible, right? Maybe have an outline and then go into some, explanation of whatever, but have some bullet points. Make it as easy as possible. Think of this as evidence, right? Because if you get wrongfully convicted, these letters could save you. A lot of people, what they want to do is just, because it's easier, right? Just call their attorney on the phone and just talk to them, complain to them, request things, whatever it is, right? Just on the phone, everything's on the phone. And although a moment ago I just told you that the conversation is recorded, but these conversations are recorded not for you to get later on. These conversations recorded, so that the prosecutor can build a case against you. If 10 years down the line, you want to prove that you told your attorney to give a certain jury instruction, or you told your attorney to go reach out to this potential witness that was an alibi witness or something, right? Yeah, good luck getting those conversations. I mean, I don't even know how you would go about it 5 or 10 years down the line. But if you have letters, right? If you've done this and you have letters, if you've kept a copy, which you should do, but even if you haven't kept copies, so the public defender's office or your attorney is supposed to keep copies of everything you send them, right? So if they've kept copies and it's in their file, that could save you. That's what saved me, right? In my case, even the ones that I sent to them that had no dates, because these are public defenders, they have a system in place. They have a paralegal that receives some, all this mail, right, in the mailroom, and they had stamped with their stamp the dates and times of when they got these letters. And luckily that saved me. I'm guessing that's probably common practice with most offices, but just in case, go ahead and put the date on there, make them super professional. Mines were not, but they had enough of the content, right, that of what I needed and what I was requesting that I, in the end, it turned out okay, right? It worked out. It took a long time, but it worked out. So that's number 7. Make sure you keep your conversations with your attorney to a minimum. Keep in mind also that although your attorney might seem like a nice person right now, you don't know what's going to happen 6 months or a year down the line, right? You might say something to offend them, or they might change their mind, or they might just simply forget. Very common, right? They have tons of cases. You request something, right, over the phone, and then you ask them, say 2 years later, 3 years later, for an affidavit where you go, hey, you remember I told you to do this and this, but that wasn't done? So it could be that they forgot, or it could be ego. Don't forget that part of it. Like, sometimes it's just pride, right? Like, they don't want to admit that they're wrong. It doesn't really affect their career as far as I know, right? But you'd be surprised how often that comes into play where their pride does not allow them to admit that they made a mistake, which is crazy, right? Because somebody's life is on the line, but their pride is more important. It's more important for them to save face and say, I didn't make that mistake, than it is to admit that they screwed up, and then, you know, let's give this person here a second chance at, you know, at life, right? They were wrongfully convicted. It happened in my case. It's insane, but I've seen it in other people's situations as well. So I hope that was helpful. This is not everything, right? This is not an exhaustive list of everything you should do, but it's just 7 points of, you know, things that you should do probably, you know what I mean, if you've been wrongfully arrested, and things to keep in mind. You know, listen to my content, because this is kind of a subject that's pretty broad. There's a lot of points that could be expanded further, and I'll be doing that in some future videos. So anyways, I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in my next video. The content I produce, and this is not legal advice.